Before music was digital, it was alive. It came from turntables, transistor radios, and record shops that smelled of cardboard sleeves and dreams. The 60s and 70s were more than just decades. They were a soundtrack to growing up, falling in love, and finding out who we were. These were the songs that filled every living room, every school disco, every long summer evening. And though time moved on, their echo never left us. Let's rewind to the 15 British pop hits that defined the 1960s and 70s and the memories we still miss today. 1. The Beatles, Hey Jude, 1968. There's no song that captures the emotional core of the late 60s quite like Hey Jude. It wasn't just a tune, it was a moment of connection, a slow-building anthem that wrapped its arms around an entire generation. You could hear it pouring from every pub jukebox and every car radio that summer. Paul McCartney's voice began like a whisper and ended like a roar as the Na 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 chorus stretched on, uniting everyone who sang along. It was hopeful, human, and healing. The perfect song for a world trying to find itself after years of change. For many, Hey Jude wasn't just a song, it was a companion. Played at weddings, parties, and sometimes at the quietest moments of life, it reminded us all to take a sad song and make it better. 2. The Kinks, Waterloo Sunset, 1967. Ray Davies didn't just write songs, he painted pictures, and Waterloo Sunset was one of his masterpieces. A gentle, melancholy ode to London and the quiet poetry of everyday life. It captured the beauty of ordinary people just being. Terry meets Julie, Waterloo Station, every Friday night. That single line evokes a world. You can almost feel the evening glow on the Thames, the chatter of the city fading as two lovers walk hand in hand. It was a song about belonging and bittersweet peace, about watching life flow past and finding meaning in its stillness. In an era filled with noise and revolution, Waterloo Sunset whispered, and somehow that whisper has never faded. 3. The Rolling Stones, Angie, 1973. By the early 70s, the Stones had already conquered the world, but Angie showed a softer side of the band that few expected. With its haunting piano, acoustic guitar and Mick Jagger's aching voice, it became an anthem for heartbreak and memory. It wasn't the swagger of Satisfaction or the menace of Gimme Shelter. Angie was something more intimate, almost confessional. It played in living rooms after arguments, on late-night radio when the world outside was asleep, and in the hearts of everyone who had ever lost someone they loved. The 70s were full of rock giants, but Angie reminded Britain that even rebels bleed, and that a great pop song could be as fragile as it was timeless. 4. Dusty Springfield, Son of a Preacher Man, 1968. Dusty Springfield wasn't just the voice, she was the voice. Smoky, soulful, and unmistakably British, she brought an edge of emotion that few could match. Son of a Preacher Man had swing, but also sadness. That knowing tone of someone who understood the thrill of love and the ache that followed. You could hear it playing from every hair salon, every record player in shared flats, and every youth club jukebox where couples slow dance with awkward grace. Dusty's voice carried a generation through its loves and losses. She wasn't just a pop star. She was the sound of longing, independence, and quiet rebellion wrapped into one unforgettable voice.
5. The Who, My Generation, 1965. If there was ever a battle cry for the youth of Britain, this was it. Raw, loud, and utterly unapologetic. My Generation exploded like a shout from the heart of a restless nation. Pete Townshend's snarling guitar, Keith Moon's chaotic drumming, and Roger Daltrey's defiant stutter turned a simple song into an anthem. It wasn't polished, it wasn't polite, and that's exactly why it mattered. In the swingin' 60s, when the world was changing faster than anyone could understand, my generation gave voice to everyone who felt left behind or misunderstood. When Daltrey spat out, "Hope I die before I get old," it wasn't about death. It was about refusing to give in, to grow dull, to stop feeling alive. Decades later, the energy of that song still shakes the air whenever it plays, proof that rebellion never really gets old. 6. The Hollies. He Ain't Heavy, He's My Brother, 1969. Few songs from the late 60s carried as much heart as He Ain't Heavy, He's My Brother. It wasn't flashy or fast. It was slow, emotional, and profound, a song that seemed to stop time whenever it came on. The Hollies' harmonies were rich and pure, and the orchestral swell behind them made the lyrics feel like scripture. It wasn't just a song about brotherhood, it was about kindness, duty, and the quiet strength that held people together during tough times. Families sang it together, pubs fell silent when it played on the jukebox, and parents would murmur, "That's a proper song, that." The 60s were filled with noise, protest, and motion, but He Ain't Heavy was a reminder of gentleness, that compassion was still at the core of who we were. Decades later, it's still played at funerals, charity events, and moments of reflection because its message never stopped being true. 7. Elton John, Rocket Man, 1972. In the early 70s, Elton John wasn't just a performer, he was a phenomenon. Rocket Man was his masterpiece, a song that managed to sound both enormous and intimate at once. The moment that haunting melody begins, you're somewhere else entirely, floating through the vastness of space, but somehow also sitting alone in your living room with the lights low and your thoughts drifting. Bernie Taupin's lyrics painted loneliness with poetic grace, and Elton's voice gave it humanity. It was more than a song about astronauts. It was about the feeling of being distant, misunderstood, reaching for something just out of touch. For every dreamer, every outsider, every working Brit who stared out of their window and wondered if life had more to give, Rocket Man spoke directly to them. It's still one of those songs that makes you stop whatever you're doing and just listen. A timeless masterpiece of melancholy and wonder.
8. The Bee Gees, To Love Somebody, 1967. Before disco, before the white suits and flashing lights, the Bee Gees were masters of soulful heartbreak. To Love Somebody was proof of that. A ballad so rich, so aching, it could make even the toughest man pause mid-sentence. Barry Gibb's voice carried a sincerity that few could imitate. The song's simple arrangement, a soft organ, gentle guitar, and that unforgettable melody turned it into something deeply human. It was about longing, about wanting to give love to someone who didn't quite see it the same way. In 1967 Britain, when emotions were often kept quiet and stoic, this song broke through the silence. It was raw, vulnerable, and real. People sang it to lovers, to memories, to themselves, and every time it played on the radio, hearts softened just a little. Even today, that first line, "There's a light," feels like stepping into another time. One where love hurt, but it was worth every second of the pain. 9. David Bowie, Life on Mars, 1971. There was nothing ordinary about David Bowie, and Life on Mars proved it. When it hit the airwaves in 1971, it was like nothing anyone had ever heard before. Bowie's theatrical voice soared over Mick Ronson's sweeping arrangement, creating something that felt part rock opera, part cosmic dream. The lyrics were cryptic, strange, poetic, but they captured a mood that millions understood, the feeling of being lost in a world that didn't quite make sense. The teenage dreamers, the misfits, the quiet thinkers, all of them found a mirror in Bowie's words. You'd hear it blasting from bedrooms late at night or echoing from record players in smoky flats shared by students and artists. It didn't just define a generation, it redefined what pop music could be. Every note, every line was a work of art, a message to anyone who felt different, that there was beauty in being out of place. Half a century later, that piano still stirs something deep, the sense that Bowie was speaking for all of us, looking up at the stars and wondering if maybe, just maybe, there was more. 10. Fleetwood Mac, Go Your Own Way, 1977. By the late 70s rolled around, Fleetwood Mac had turned heartbreak into art. Go Your Own Way was explosive, a mix of fury, freedom, and melody that seemed to speak for anyone who'd ever loved and lost. The guitar riffs cut sharp, the drums thundered like frustration, and Lindsey Buckingham's voice cracked with real emotion. It wasn't just about romance, it was about independence, resilience, and the messy beauty of moving on. British listeners connected to it instantly. It was the kind of song that made you drive a little faster, sing a little louder, and remember the one who got away. And even though Fleetwood Mac's story was drenched in turmoil, their music was pure connection, the kind that made you feel alive, even in the pain. When it played on Radio 1, you could almost hear the whole country tapping along. Half of them angry, half of them in love, and all of them completely captivated.
Number 11. The Animals, House of the Rising Sun, 1964. If one song could sum up the grit and soul of British rock in the 60s, it was House of the Rising Sun. From the first trembling notes of that iconic guitar intro, the world knew it was hearing something powerful, something raw and unpolished that spoke directly to the working class. Eric Burdon's deep, mournful voice carried all the weight of a hard life, regret, defiance, and tragedy wrapped into one thunderous performance. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't clean, it was real. Every pub jukebox in the country seemed to play it that summer, and every young lad who owned a guitar tried to learn those haunting chords. It was a song that transcended the usual pop formula. It felt ancient, like a story passed down through generations, reborn with a British accent and electric urgency. When Burdon's voice cried out that final verse, you could feel it in your bones. It wasn't just a hit, it was an awakening. Decades later, its power hasn't dulled. It's still the sound of smoke-filled bars, calloused hands, and a generation that found poetry in pain. Number 12. The Zombies, Time of the Season, 1968. As the 60s drew to a close, few songs captured the strange mix of hope, sensuality, and mystery quite like Time of the Season. With its breathy "Who's Your Daddy" refrain and hypnotic rhythm, it was unlike anything else on the radio. Part psychedelic daydream, part quiet revolution. Rod Argent's haunting organ, Colin Blunstone's silky voice, and those perfectly layered harmonies gave it a sound both modern and timeless. It wasn't loud or angry, it was smooth, confident, and effortlessly cool. The kind of song that didn't need to shout to make the world stop and listen. For the teenagers of the late 60s, it became the soundtrack to slow dances, long evenings, and moments that words couldn't quite describe. You could hear it drifting from upstairs windows on warm summer nights, or playing softly in candlelit living rooms as the decade turned a new page. It's the kind of song that doesn't age. It lingers, shimmering like a memory half remembered, the sound of youth itself echoing down the years. Number 13. Rod Stewart, Maggie May, 1971. There are songs that you like, and then there are songs that become part of you. Maggie May was one of those. When Rod Stewart's raspy, soulful voice filled the airwaves in 1971, it felt like a confession whispered in your ear.
It told the story of a young man, wide-eyed and naive, tangled in an affair that was equal parts romance and regret. The mandolin danced around the melody, the drums thumped with life, and Rod sang like he was both proud and broken at once. Maggie May wasn't slick or perfect. It was messy, human, and irresistible. It spoke to every young person who'd ever made a mistake they secretly didn't regret. And it made Stewart a legend, the working-class poet in a leather jacket singing truth without apology. You'd hear it blasting from cars, from radios in back gardens, from pubs late at night. And every time that chorus hit, "Maggie, I wish I'd never seen your face," there was always someone singing along, smiling sadly, remembering their own Maggie.
14. T-Rex, Get It On, 1971. If the early 70s had a sound, glittery, electric, full of swagger, it was T-Rex, and Get It On was Mark Bolan's masterpiece. Glam rock had arrived, and suddenly the high street sparkled a little brighter. That slinky guitar riff, the hand claps, the confidence dripping from every lyric, it was pure magic. Bolan didn't just sing, he purred, swaggered, and hypnotized. For teenagers across Britain, Get It On was liberation. It was a permission slip to shine, to strut, to be whoever you wanted to be. You could hear it pouring from transistor radios, shaking school discos, or echoing through bedrooms where kids danced in front of mirrors with hairbrush microphones. Bolan was the kind of star who didn't seem real, part rock god, part fairy tale creature. And for a few glorious years, Britain lived in his world. Even now, that opening riff still makes hearts race. It's impossible to hear it and not feel that jolt of joy, that memory of a time when life was loud, colorful, and full of possibility. 15. The Moody Blues, Nights in White Satin, 1967. Few songs have ever captured longing the way Nights in White Satin did. The Moody Blues didn't just write a love song, they wrote a dream. From the first swelling chords to the final whispered poetry, it was pure emotion, drenched in melancholy and beauty. Justin Hayward's voice floated above the orchestra like a confession, fragile, heartfelt, and endlessly haunting. For some, it was a song about heartbreak. For others, it was about life itself, the passage of time, the ache of memory, the sweetness of what might have been. When it played on late-night radio, you'd stop whatever you were doing. Maybe you'd sit in the dark. Maybe you'd think of someone you missed. But you listened, because Nights in White Satin wasn't background music. It demanded to be felt. Even now, it still has that power. A song that doesn't just remind you of the past, it feels like the past. Slow, soft, eternal. The perfect ending to an era of music that defined not just decades, but lives.